aside from the visa on arrival where the $50 just evaporated. But I think making things smooth, removing the friction, could make the difference of $1 billion in a year for Ghana. Part of the issue is that it's very much a focus on the money that can be made now instead of the money that could be made later. Because we treat most visitors, and I forget who said it in the chat in the last couple of days, but because a lot of the visitors, we don't expect them to come back, we try to squeeze them for as much money as we can while they're here. Unfortunately, we don't realize the impact that that has on people where they're coming from, because then they tell that story, and then people are going to other countries instead of here. Meanwhile, this place is amazing, right? So, part-time, full-time, if we can get a better handle on the differences between both, and we can create opportunities for each that are smooth, that in itself will raise the travel and tourism GDP, because more people would be interested in coming here. Visitors, right now, all of our eggs are in one basket, primarily. Does anybody know what the basket is? Diaspora and December, because they're right. We market almost exclusively to the diaspora. Meanwhile, there's all these other populations that are willing to spend a whole lot more money. And if you've ever been to one of my workshops, and one of my favorite things to point out is we're completely ignoring the Spanish-speaking world. The Spanish themselves spend the most money, arguably, from a tourism perspective. They're in the top echelon of travelers. Europeans, why do they usually rank in the top tourist lists? Vacation, and they can afford it. I'm French. By law, quality of life is priority. You get so much time, and then if you're an educator on top of that, you barely ever work, right? And so if you have all that time, what do? You travel, and you get a fair wage. So why wouldn't you go to another country and explore? But we completely ignore, and I say completely, and that's probably not accurate, 99% ignore the Spanish-speaking world. I was happy to see pictures about Germany today. How many of you have had groups from Germany? Any? That's disturbing, because my understanding is we've had a relationship with sending our representatives to Germany for a few years. I mean, there are probably some that come through, but again, it goes back to that definition of part-time versus full-time tourists. How many full-time visitors are we getting from Germany? Probably very few to none. Part-time, we probably get a ton from a business perspective, because Germany is an incredibly business-oriented country. So it would make sense that they would try to do business in Ghana. But there are countless populations that we completely ignore. You could sell the experience of teaching people how to carry things on their head. This is an everyday thing. We see it every place we go. People will pay. One of my favorite ideas or concepts is about farming, and the idea that you can have people pay you to work your farm. 100%. Here, I'll give you the exact layout. Okay, you have a farm. There is a modest place for people to sleep, which is for your family primarily. You create an experience, website, branding, marketing, Facebook ads, that sort of thing. And you basically invite people to have an agricultural experience with items that they're not familiar with. I'll give you an example here. How many of you have ever seen breadfruit? Okay, there's a little bit of breadfruit in Ghana. And that was, I believe it's a couple that did this experiment, and they're planting them in different places. But the easy one is cacao, because cacao is obviously a very big thing for this country and for Côte d'Ivoire. People spend big money to visit where the cacao comes from. But you could have some type of farm with something that is unique to Ghana, or that grows a certain way, and if you advertise it the right way, people will pay big money to come and stay on your farm and learn how to grow it, how to cook it, how to cultivate it. And here's the trick. When you come from the global north, and I say that Europe, Asia, North America, when you travel, you can bring 2 50-pound bags plus a carry-on and sometimes a personal bag. Do you know how much you can fit in two 50-pound bags? A lot. So what you do, you say, okay, Dexter, Jonathan, Marcus, Cecilia, these are the people that bought the experience. Say, okay, I'm going to give you a $100 discount on your experience if you bring these items. IKEA, bedding, pillows, other items to fit in those 50-pound bags. So when they come over, they're outfitting your farm with all that you need to invite the next wave of people. You create an experience that is unique, that they can't get where they are. If you're studying agriculture as a student, undergraduate, graduate perhaps, doctoral, you want to get exposure to things that are unique, that are different. You want to be able to tell a different story. And so if there's a farm in Ghana that has that particular thing or something very unique that they can write a paper on, they will pay money. They will get scholarships to pay money to come to the farm, and they will work it for free. They will pay you to work your farm. That's kind of nice. And they will help you build the infrastructure. So one of the examples in the book was an Irish couple in the middle of Spain. And apparently this property was damaged by fire. So half the house was burned, the pool was damaged, and then all the grounds, for as far as you could see, was just burned to crisp. Okay? So they bought the property for nothing. And they rebuilt it. They're very handy, older couple, just very handy. Rebuilt the pool, rebuilt the house. And then what they did is they bought yurts. Does anybody know what a yurt is? A yurt could be the size of this section, maybe a little bit bigger. It could be the entire thing, because they come in different sizes. And so they bought 3 yurts, and they installed them on their property. And then they created solar panels to power everything on the property. And so all the water was heated through solar power. If you needed to plug in your phone, it was solar power. All the lights, solar power. It was very much off the grid. And then they were a destination. They were booked solid for Airbnb, months and months in advance. And they used the money to reinvest. But what I love about it, and it's a little bit different than the farm idea, but there's a picture in the book of a bathroom. And you'll laugh at the picture because you see my hands hanging out of it, because it was so small. It was like this wide, and it was this tall off the ground, and it had a shower, a toilet, a sink, everything in it. And it was heated through the solar. Very, very efficient, very, very simple. And so with very small pieces, you can create an experience for people, and then every time somebody comes to visit, you can have them bring you more stuff. Now, it's not easy. Obviously, you have to find the people, and we'll talk about Smurf in a moment. But you have this opportunity to start very small and to have people basically pay for the building of your operation. You can start small. One of the foundational principles, and my students here will know this, I hope, there's this idea of under-promise and over-deliver. If you were to create that farm concept and say, you will have a safe place to stay, but it is very meager in terms of what you expect from being in America or being in Canada or being somewhere else, you lower their expectations, but it's just in that what we call the sweet spot, so that they're not afraid to come and spend time with you. You can create a very big spectrum of experiences for people to come here, and it just depends on what you want to do. If you know your market and you know what people are interested in, you can pretty much create anything. The farm is one example. Voluntourism is another example. Sometimes people just want to do good. And the quote that I loved from her husband was, she wanted to do this because this is something that she can own as her story for what she does in relation to Ghana. You know, when we went and she got to see the clinic where the borehole was situated, it reinforced her wanting to do this over again. I'm pretty sure that every time I come to Ghana going forward, she's going to send me with a nice big blue bag. So, beautiful or interesting, what else is in your backyard that could turn into a tourism experience? What is something you do every day that Westerners may not do? Eating local food. Okay, 100%. And we do a decent amount of exposure to that for visitors. I think I said earlier, like I can't get enough plantains when I'm here. I'm not so much into some of the other traditional dishes, although I'll eat quite a bit of jollof rice when I'm here. It's amazing wherever I go in West Africa, I'm always asked, the first question is, which is the better jollof rice? More important than anything else I have to offer, apparently. But yeah, just exposure. I think the added piece that we don't do enough of is teaching people how to make these dishes, which I think is a huge opportunity. That is a really good point. One of the neatest experiences, one of the parts of the book I talk about fabritourism, but this idea of following something from the very beginning all the way to the end. There's a fashion example in the book, but one of the examples that I'll share is olive oil. How many of you know where Slovenia is? But they share air basically with Italy. So from an olive oil production perspective, they've always been in that business. And for a minute, I was a partner in an olive oil company based in Slovenia. And what I loved about the experience is that you could see where the olives were grown and actually go and spend time with the people that were picking the olives. And then you have lunch with them, and then you watch the olives as they're transported to the facility where they're squeezed to create olive oil. And then you turn around and you're driving into Italy to see where the olive oil is used in a restaurant. And then you come back, and then you're making a meal with a chef on site, and you're staying in a facility in the groves. So you have this start to finish experience that can be sold to visitors all the time. And you can do that with anything if you just can package it the right way. Cacao is a really good example here, but there's a number of other things that can be done in that regard. So yes, from a food perspective, I think we're still early days in terms of what we can do, and I know that's already going on, but I think it's easier to find those experiences where I live in New York than it is here. There's a Ghanaian woman that I found that this is all she does, is she does Ghanaian dinners for people in northern New York, and she gets a constant flood of people because they're really curious. I think it would be a better experience if they did it here, because you could actually follow the entire process. Down to running after the salt truck and getting salt. I think that's really fun, which is very strange to Westerners, by the way. It's a hard question to ask because the things that are right in front of you don't think are beautiful or interesting necessarily. But I constructed this entire experience around the visiting of villages and seeing where these things are made, meeting the people that craft the wood and the leather and the whole entire process from start to finish. With writers, I think that would be pretty amazing to go and sit with them and be exposed to their process, again, from start to finish. It could be compose poetry with a Ghanaian. That in itself, that would be an experience. Let me flip it from a business perspective. Do you know how many people study languages in the world? It's a lot. And part of the requirement in most programs is that you do a final project. And there's money for travel and scholarships to fund the ability to have an experience like that. The hard part is getting that experience to be connected with those people. And so from a marketing perspective, I would package it, nice shiny website, a little bit of social media, and then I would send it to key institutions that visibly value that kind of experience. And then you create the pipeline. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, there are students coming to you every year, right? And you can do that with anything within the creative area. That's a good one. Anything else beautiful or interesting that comes to mind? Braids. Yeah. Oh, hair is great. This was a side project that I worked on and then never completed in California when I was on vacation. I learned that there was a gap for fathers of African American children that didn't know how to braid their daughter's hair. Sounds funny, right? And so I created a camp concept where dads would come in and learn how to braid. What if you flipped it and you made it an African experience based on the history of hair and from basically throughout the whole experience, you're learning all the different styles and strategies. But also, I learned, because I went to a hair festival a year and a half ago here, learning about natural hair care versus products and chemicals and strategies to make sure that you have the long living hair and healthy hair throughout your lifetime. So I think that that's a great one too. Again, how do you package it? How do you market it? And then where do you find your target market? Sometimes people are just looking for a reason and an excuse to go somewhere. And that is something that would be a unique story that they could tell instead of the ChatGPT itinerary. So what did you do this summer? Oh, I went to Ghana and I went to this hair thing. And then they tell everything and people are like, what? That's so much more interesting than half the stuff that people talk about. I was born and raised in Paris, France. You trip over people that have been to Paris, France in the US. Everybody's been. Because that's one of the top destinations that people go to. And the reality is, it's kind of stale. It's far more interesting to come to Ghana than it is to go to Paris, in my mind. And that's my home country, and my home city where I was born. And so I think if you create those unique differentiators like that, like the farm, those are the things that are going to tip the balance for people to choose Ghana over other places. But we just have to get better at creating those experiences, packaging them, and getting them out there. But I think that's a great idea. So we're going to talk about alphabet soup. So we talked about GTA being the DMO for Ghana. CVB stands for Convention and Visitors Bureau. And CFC is an acronym for Chamber of Commerce. There's not going to be a quiz, maybe for Portia. But these are organizations that have, depending on where you are, they have the responsibility of selling a destination. GTA is basically all three. And depending on where you go, what country, what community, you might have overlapping. So we talked about Brooklyn a little bit earlier. In New York City, there is a big DMO for New York City, then there's one for Brooklyn, and then there's one for New York State. And they kind of overlap, but they also have different priorities. And so it changes where they put their focus. And so the hard part is, I'll use Sahum as an example. I think we did a borehole in Sahum. That's why it's coming to mind. Who serves the needs of Sahum from a marketing DMO perspective, tourism perspective? We don't know, probably, right? GTA should, but when your focus is the entire country, it's hard to cover the entire country. That's why it's important sometimes to have a smaller CVB that's responsible for a smaller area, because they can be more attentive and more responsive. And so that's why in New York State, you have the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce that takes care of Brooklyn. And they bring together people in Brooklyn businesses, hotels, restaurants, you name it, and get them talking. And by doing that, they're getting the attention they deserve, and they're creating opportunities. They're trying to get conferences to come in. They're trying to get athletic tournaments to come in. They're trying to get festivals to come in. If Brooklyn was depending on the New York State Tourism Authority, if you will, to do that, they don't necessarily care about Brooklyn as much. They're worried about Buffalo and Syracuse and other parts of the state where they have only so much bandwidth. That's something to think about from the perspective of Ghana. Maybe there needs to be different entities in different parts of the country to focus. And GTA does have representation everywhere. But do they have the right people in the right spots? Do they have enough resources? Are they talking to each other in terms of listing of sites? If you're going to start from scratch, do it from the beginning, would you create a different structure so that every region is feeding information so that there's one big massive list of all the tourism sites and experiences? Maybe you would. So again, alphabet soup, there's a lot of acronyms. I don't expect you to remember all these. What's important is the function, what they do or what they should be doing. So let's talk about SMURF: social, military, education, religious, fraternal. This is the acronym that we use to identify different types of organizations. So my frat brother there, we're part of the F. Doreen's part of the F. If you're a member of a fraternity or sorority, you're part of the F. If you're a Mason, you're part of the F. If you're part of any fraternal order, you're part of the F. So that's just one of 5 letters that is gigantic around the world. Social covers a lot of ground. Military, it's not just who's in the armed forces, but it's more veteran groups. It's retired, it's auxiliaries, it's a number of different things. Religious, we know religion in Ghana, right? A lot of religion going on here. Church groups travel all the time out of the United States. All the time. They love to travel. That's part of the reason you want to be part of your church, because they go to Atlantic City and Vegas all the time. Go gamble. Education, it's those that work in education, it's the students at every level. They love to travel. The difference with education is that there's really, really strong companies and organizations that basically dominate the travel world. I have a whole section talking about this in the book because, unfortunately, they're doing most of the selling to Ghana, and they're making a lot of money, but that money never gets here. There's one example, I think I put it in the book, where for 2 weeks maybe in Ghana, or maybe it was 4 weeks. Anyway, it was very short, and it was $7,500 for the experience. And I just wonder where that money's going. It's going into the company, and it's never making it here. Now, some of my former students work for those companies, and they provide a service. The service that they provide is risk management, because educators don't have the time or the bandwidth to plan a trip and all the details having to do with a trip. And if they don't have boots on the ground, if they don't have people here that they can trust, they want to hire a company where there's the illusion of safety and risk management. And they'll pay an extra $4,000 a person for that. Where it bothers me, and this is not y'all's issue in Ghana, because it's happening in the global north, my issue is that we're not sending enough students here because we're paying too much for them in the first place. The opportunity from a tourism entrepreneurship perspective is you all can create better opportunities for those educators for half the price, and you're still going to make a ton of money, right? And University of Ghana does have a program, although when I talked to them, they were a little shifty about the details. I just don't think it's necessarily marketed as well as it could be. But they have something that exists, it's just what could we do more? So SMERF is really tricky. And I'm going to talk about the call center in just a second. 2 years ago, there was a conference, Intertourism Conference. I was one of the speakers. And at one moment, somebody said, "Are we all excited for MICE?" And everybody said, "Yes." And I said, "No," because there is a very specific thing that relates to MICE, and that is safety. It says how to evaluate MICE potential. In order to be a player in the MICE game, your community needs ASICs. And when I say ASICs, I don't mean the shoes. Okay? But I know that you'll remember that because of the shoes, and I love ASICs. So if you read them from top to bottom, access, service, infrastructure, capacity, and safety. Do we lack any of this in Ghana? So are we ready for MICE? Unfortunately not. So when we think about MICE, it sounds great, and we're very optimistic here. And there are some groups that we can attract with the right influence. More mainstream SMERF organizations won't come here because they take a look at what they can find, and from an ASICS perspective, it doesn't meet their standard. For some organizations, capacity-wise, we're fine. And I would argue that we're probably the safest country on the continent. Argue. Infrastructure, we know that there are issues. But we can start small and improve. If we talk about infrastructure, we can improve here, we can improve there. If somebody's coming in and they're going to have a limited experience and they're basically going to just stay in Accra, doesn't matter if the roads aren't great to the monkey sanctuary. From an access perspective, talk about visa, that is going to stop them in their tracks time and time again. You ask 10 people that have been to Ghana from the global north, and 9 of them will say that it was very challenging, and that is generous. So, do we like the acronym ASICS? Does it help? And we can be strategic. We can help each one of those letters, but we just have to put forth some effort. I think that MICE is a great opportunity. It's just really hard to get there currently. But let me come back to SMERF. So, we talked about it earlier. What is the number one population that we go after? The diaspora. We put a lot of eggs in one basket. We established, just from the nodding that I saw in the crowd, that even though we're putting effort into Germany, it's not really necessarily paying a dividend. We are ignoring most tourists around the world. What I will argue is that the number of African Americans that are coming here, it's starting to plateau. It's not as sexy as it used to be to come here. Too many people are reporting back that it was challenging, that they got stopped by the police, that they were taken advantage of. These are moments of truth. These are stories that people like to tell. On average, you will tell 3 people a good story, but you'll tell 8 people a bad story. So it makes it even more difficult to sustain where we are if we don't expand our reach. The point I'm making is every group that comes here is the potential for more people to come here. And if you create a bad experience for people, you're cutting that off. If you have a family that comes here, 15 people, and you take advantage of them, you could have cost the country $1 million in future business because they're going to tell everybody they know that they had a bad experience. But on the flip side, our friend Mo, who runs one of the tour groups here, if they have an amazing experience with Mo, they're making plans to come back before they even leave. And they could, one of those people out of 15 could be the key to thousands of people because they just so happen to work in the study abroad office for a school. So, from a SMERF perspective, getting back to SMERF specifically, call centers are incredibly important and they really don't exist here. Most of the pipelines are managed by very few people in the tourism sector. And some of them are my friends. And it's nice that they're doing well, but I want more people to do well. There is so much opportunity and so much to go around. Let them keep the diaspora. The current friends of mine that are doing well with the diaspora, let them keep the diaspora. I want new tour people to go after Spain and Portugal, and the list goes on.
What we have here, that's why more of the concentration is in the diaspora, other than getting other foreign, countries here, which I totally understand because we have African, we have blacks in other different countries like Portugal, Spain, and all of that, of which they might not know if they have lineage down here. So how do we expand into such territories so that it wouldn't just be an African diaspora, codes?
I think what you hit the nail on is this idea that there is a built-in marketing vehicle because the diaspora, where Ghana really doesn't have to market as much because it's automatic. It's bloodline, it's genealogy. That does all the marketing for Ghana. So that, I think, reinforces why we need to focus on other angles. The other side of it is the slave castles are not just the slave castles because of that. There are so many other aspects of the slave castles that, in terms of stories that are never told enough. And so if you think about it that way, what if you were to look at the slave castle and remove the history? It's a structure. It's a military structure. It's an old structure. It is made with certain materials. It has coastline. It has fishing elements surrounding it, right? Whichever ones we're talking about, they're all pretty much on the water, right? So if you remove the really evil history, if we can for a moment, and we think about it in a different way, then that creates an opportunity for a totally different tourism group. The other side of it is, and we already get this, and I think there's better storytellers than others, when you have a Portuguese visitor come, because let's assume that many are not coming in the first place, what is the story that we tell to a Portuguese group that is different than we tell an African American group. That is a completely different story, because what is at the basis for why a Portuguese group might be coming? Because they're complicit. So that should be a different story. And they want to know why they're complicit, because we don't always know our own histories. I mean, I'm both French and American. We have a lot of evil, I think other populations create an opportunity to sell a different package.
From my experience, I think the problem is a little bit bigger than this. I think there has to be penalties for I'll just say it, for the corruption. There has to be some type of penalties. When you go through with the visas, I've been stopped 11 times, and I'm not talking about the random, just, I'm talking about going through my wallet, everything I have, every bag. So I work for the, I've been here, so let me give you a story real quick. I work for the airline, and for the past 5 years, I come here once a week. So I probably know the city probably than most people that you know. So I've been pulled over 11 times. My crew members get pulled over. It is strictly harassment. And so my point is this, let's get past that point. The point is, until you talk to the police chief, and the police chief starts giving penalties or understanding the value of the diaspora or whoever the tourism is. I mean, it's pretty obvious that I'm not from here. You can just look and see. So, and when we get pulled over and get harassed and go to the Arts Center, everything costs more. I've accepted that part, but the police harassment is a lot. And so here's what I'll tell you. From my experience being on the planes, and I talk to all the passengers all the time, their biggest issue of not coming back is the police. You need to talk to police chief. He needs to have some penalties or something. There needs to be a hotline. Something, if you get pulled over and they're doing this harassment stuff, it's like being down south in the States.
Yeah.
But I'll end that right there, but I think it's a little bit higher, and that needs to be addressed.
I've always liked the idea of the American dream because it's been sold so well that everybody wants to be there. So now we have what is happening. I'm thinking that, especially in our terrain, maybe this is a long-term kind of thing, just so that it works. I think whatever it is that is put in place should factor in the individual players, whether consciously or unconsciously, so that the experiences are positive as much as possible. Because if the police know that, for instance, my action, my utterances, the way I make any visitor feel affects the experience. If we are conscious about letting that get ingrained in the minds of people, it makes it easy for us to build the tourism sector, for instance. Those on the streets, we probably will not have control over how they act, but if we know that their actions of extorting from people sort of puts off people from coming within the country to experience what we have here, we'll try and put measures in place to get them off the streets in the first place, things like that. So I'm thinking that if all these things are integrated, it makes it very easy, it makes the experience very easy. It's a long-term project, but I'm sure with all the individuals here who are interested in ensuring that this grows and becomes better, it helps. It will help eventually.
What I think is the deeper issue there is that our police here are not paid well enough. And so as a result, this is my impression from what I've understood, because they don't make enough money, they're shaking everybody down. It's part of the culture. It's part of the system. And it's totally overlooked as a result. One of the bigger issues is the police, when they do that, they don't consider the implications for the country. They don't connect shaking visitors down and their lowered investment in the country or their willingness to come back, which in turn hurts their ability, because where does their pay come from? Multiplier effect. More money comes into the country, into the community, there's more money to pay the police. Indirectly, very zigzaggy, but eventually, it's like New York City. The reason why we have a great subway system, stinky subway system, but it runs all night and one of the best in the world, is because of the tourists that come through that subsidize the cost of the subway system. But I am of the opinion over the years that Ghana could far exceed what South Africa can do, because we have everything that South Africa has, but I think we're actually a more peaceful country. South Africa is amazing when it comes to marketing. You walk in and it's like, boom, a big old lion, giant, it's beautiful. But we have that too here. We just don't market it as well. I mean, Mole, Safari, I mean, it's a thing. I've never done it. But what I'm saying, again, I've never been to South Africa, but I've had enough people tell me I am optimistic that we could do better here.
The monkey in the room, or the elephant in the room, whichever part of Africa you want to be in, is the will of the powers that be, the government, the local authorities, that tourism is a viable economic driver for the country, and that it has got the same value as cocoa, if not more. I'm from New Zealand, as I said earlier, and let me tell you that in last year they had 3.3 million tourists come through the country, of the size of only 5 million. There's a population of 5 million, so they almost double the population each year. The expenditure, the people that came through, this is the 3 million, spent $44.4 billion. The GDP on that was 17%. It is a easy way of making money. The tourists come in, they drop the money, and they piss off. It is the government and the local authorities need to value it as an industry, and I don't think they do that here. Because if they did, you wouldn't have this harassment by the police. People would buy into the value of tourism rather than see it as something, we'll just have a few diaspora come in, we'll focus on that, we won't focus on anything else. That's why I welcome the seminar that you were given and your book. I think it is very valuable and it is very timely.
It's called the line of sight. So the line of sight concept is everybody along the way impacts the tourist experience. From the driver to the police, to the clerk, to the attendant, everybody impacts that experience. And if you have a commitment to it, to tourism as a revenue stream for the country, and that you value it, then you realize that that line of sight has to be protected. But as you illustrated, there are certain entities within this country that don't get that. They're very concerned about what they can make for themselves, which I appreciate and I understand. There's a lot of people here, as you all know, that don't have the means. And so they'll get money wherever they can get it. I get that. I understand. I also believe that the government has the means to create a vibrant tourism economy, but too many funds don't make it where it's supposed to go. And I was gentle as I could be in the book to talk about this, but there are funds being poured into this country every year that never make it to where it's supposed to go.
We pretend that we are promoting tourism, but actually we are not. And those who also patronizing tourism in this country also pretend as if they're also patronizing tourism, but they are not. Simply because we don't have a plan. If we have a plan, the taxi driver would know his role to play in promoting this country. If we have a plan, the food seller on the street also will know what to do to promote this country. If we have a plan, even the ordinary rubbish collector knows what to do. We spend a lot of money in promoting this country. I don't know what we promote. As we speak, the government and the GTA and the ministry are maybe in Germany promoting Ghana. For many years, The same itinerary many people are using in this country for promoting tourism. We've not even increased them 1 inch. Yet we keep on promoting tourism in this country. The question is, what are we promoting? And interesting enough, all the tourism trade industries we have in this country are also connected. They don't talk to each other. There is no connectivity. So everybody is trying to do something on their own. And interestingly enough, the industry largely is controlled by the private sector. The government that needs to put the policy together is behaving as if they are they are putting the policy, but they are not.
I can say with certainty, when I first went to the first castle, my very first trip, the person I paid took my money and then handed it to Madame, and Madame put it in her shirt. That was the first experience. I was like, aha, so this is how things work. I didn't quite know where the money was going. Now that you actually get a receipt, I still have my first receipt from going to Kwame Nkrumah Memorial Park. Again, it was probably a receipt that was printed in the 1970s at the time. So there has been progress. I've seen pricing structures change at sites and experiences. Less expensive for children, more expensive for visitors, which I support. I've seen more credit card use, but I think the pandemic had more to do with that than anything else. To not just be a cash-based community environment. So there has been progress. Do we have a lot of room to grow? Absolutely. And that's why this session is important, and that's why this book is important, because the idea is to have a roadmap for where to go and how to do it. I talked about peg drums as a fabritourism concept. From a tourism experience, tourism entrepreneurship opportunity, a peg drum is a great opportunity. As an example, anything that is made in Ghana can be a tourism experience. And that is a beautiful one. I say this because people's lives are interesting. We have the W.E.B. Du Bois House Center here. Perfect example for Ghana. There are other examples of that here that could be turned into tourism experiences. Now, it's all about timing, right? And you don't want to be too quick to be like, I know you're getting old. Can we turn your house into a museum? Please don't do that. But there are some very interesting people that live in Ghana or have lived in Ghana, and their homes or their properties could be turned into tourism experiences. People are curious for the right crowd. Return visitors. We have to get out of this mindset that Ghana is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Number one, we should encourage as much as possible that people get multi-visit visas. We should not be stingy about this. We should be generous with this. If they have a visa, there's one less obstacle for them to come here. Yellow fever is challenging, but it's a 10-year yellow fever pass card. So if we prioritize multi-visit visas, then people are more likely to come again. Again, it's that line of sight thing. When they come here, we have to value them. We have to give them just enough positive experiences so that they want to come back. And that goes back to this 500 tours concept. I create a grid for Ghana, breaking up the country into about 50 different blocks, including water. We have not done enough in terms of leveraging what water can be for tourism in this country at all. We've barely scratched the surface, okay? So if we think about 50 blocks of the country, there should be tourism sites in every single one of them. Sites and experiences. This is not just an Accra thing. This is not just a Kumasi thing. This is not just a Mole thing or Tamale thing. So the other benefit to that is we remedy over-tourism by spreading it out. If we have more unique tour concepts, then you're not going to have too many people going to the castles. You'll have just the right amount. There are so many beautiful places to go to in this country, but people don't know about them. It goes back to the listing issue. People don't know. I haven't been to most of them because of A, I don't know about them, or B, it's an infrastructure issue. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Prof, my question is this. I just want to pick your thoughts on the idea of over-tourism. I mean, considering that maybe prior to 2019, when we had the year of return, beyond the return, I don't think Ghana worried much about over-tourism. We didn't care about, I think people didn't even know what over-tourism is. And if you look at what you rightly said, that now the African Americans, coming here has tapered a bit. Last year we saw it. It wasn't as crazy as previous years, which means the momentum is not even going to continue. But I see you speak a lot about over-tourism. Do you think it is a real threat? Supposing we maintain the momentum, do you think Ghana is going to get to a point where over-tourism is going to be an issue because you have more of the African Americans coming in, and especially within just a period?
Given how we approach tourism in this country right now, over-tourism is not an issue because we're not marketing to most of the world. And considering the decline, the perceived decline, I have no research to back this up, no data to back this up, the decline in African Americans, the diasporans coming back, then over-tourism is not an issue. However, even with the numbers that we are getting, we do see a depreciation in some of the sites and experiences. Is the Jamestown Lighthouse even open, or is it still locked up? It's still locked up, right? Because there's no maintenance budget, there's no revenue stream to make sure that it gets taken care of. Plenty of money is going into people's hands in that area, but it's not going into that community as much as it should.
My submission this evening more is about using creativity to create tourism places. You think? So you are French, so you know Parc Astérix. It's built on somebody's creativity. You know Tintin, basically. Belgium is all Tintin is based on somebody's creativity. Right. Yes. And so, we have Disneyland, okay, is totally based on somebody's creativity. Yes. It's not based on any natural attraction. It's not based on any natural culture. It's actually based on storytelling from other cultures. So the example that we have in Ghana is Chief Momain, who's drawing his theater based on Mansa Musa, which is a legend from Mali, and so on. And he hopes to be able to have some sort of enterprise, based on this. Now, this is something that I think that we must encourage. You convert it to places of tourism and so on. Otherwise, again, all this will plateau. It will be the same places all over again with nothing being created. Whereas in other places, some of these tourism places are created. They are created within the last century. They've been created. They are not natural waterfalls or forts and castles or anything that's left from somewhere. These are totally the creations of man. And now, 50, 60 years on, they are tourism sites, raking in billions of dollars, And I think that somehow we can, Ghanaians, the creative potential that we have from being our writers, filmmakers, Malta, it's also a site for Popeye. Where are our storytellers, okay? Creating places that, after that we can visit for. Where is Anansi? Where are the stories of Anansi? Where are the Anansi villages? Where are the huge Anansi cultural centers where we experience all these stories in form, in theater, in music, put together to form places?
We have a lot of properties here that are have incredible architectural histories, and we don't highlight them enough, but there's been a little bit of an uptick, which is good. The bigger thing that I took from that, which is also in the book, is this idea that most of the most popular sites in the world were made by humans. They are not natural. Eiffel Tower, Big Ben. And so one of the things that I coin in the book is this idea of the fantastic, creating something that is the fantastic for your community. So think of the 50 sections as I break up the country into 50 blocks. What is something that community or that area can create completely new? And I use some really silly examples in the book of a giant house made to look like a shoe. People visit it every year. There's a giant corn cob. People visit it every year. So it really comes down to creativity. You can create something out of absolutely thin air And people will visit it if you market it the right way. And every region should have their list of places that could be part of that itinerary that's a lot more interesting. Doreen?
Korea, they have these villages, cultural villages where you can go rent a hanbok, like their traditional clothes. And then, wear the makeup, their shoes, everything.
Yes.
And then you have the whole experience. So you can dress up as a slave, you can dress up as a king, So it's just a whole experience.
Yes.
And Ghana has so much history. Our Nancy stories, Yasantua, so many. So I really, really like the idea. I mean, the point that he raised, because there's so much that we can do in Kumasi, in the north, so many places. Because I feel like right now everything is centered in Accra, unfortunately. But there's so much history everywhere. So that, like you said, there's no over-tourism in Accra. So people can spread out, experience the culture in different places and still have fun.
I do talk about dress in the book. The one thing that we have to be careful of is not insulting cultures by doing certain things along those lines. So one of the examples that I think I provide is creating tours around special events. So if there's a rock concert that was to come to Ghana for some reason, how many of you know who AC/DC is? They're very well known for their outrageous outfits. Outrageous. And face makeup, amazing outfits. And there's a whole business behind helping somebody dress up appropriate for the concert. And so while it's really exciting to dress up in certain garb, I can tell you that I felt a little uncomfortable this morning putting on traditional Ghanaian garb because I didn't want to offend. But I agree that it is an experience that you could create an entire tourism opportunity out of. Because I can tell you that we did it really wrong for the first 30 minutes until somebody came around and said, no, you're supposed to start with the left. I said, okay. And so we learned. But just teaching somebody that could be an experience. And there's a lot of opportunity for special events that go on in Ghana to dress a certain way or to learn the entire process. One of the coolest experiences I had was at the small museum that now got renovated, and they had a beautiful fabric presentation, and I learned a lot about the fabrics. And I think they could have gone one step further, which was how do you wear, and et cetera. And that fits right in with Ghana, Wear Ghana. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this is a good time for us to wrap. I want to just say I appreciate all of you for being here. I hope you got something out of it. I do want to say that this is just the beginning, not the end. For those of you that got a book, I appreciate you. I will be in touch if you reach out to me. My contact information is in there. All right, thank you very much.
Damian, welcome. We want to know what's the inspiration about this book, the Tourism Gold.
Yes. Yeah. About 9 years ago, I started visiting Ghana, and I was presented with a challenge, basically, to work on the tourism industry, to try to improve things. And I just fell in love with the country, and very quickly I realized that I could duplicate my efforts by researching the tourism industry here and finishing my doctorate based on that research. And my dissertation was maybe the first version of the book in a way, because there were sections that I definitely used for writing the book. And I've spent a lot of time here over the years. This is my 19th trip, and I just thought that there was a real opportunity to create a roadmap, a manual of sorts that could help individual Ghanaians as they seek to try to be a part of the tourism industry. I think it's going to be useful for people that are already in the industry that play a certain part, and then people that are brand new to it, because it really takes them through the entire spectrum of what the industry is. I know that I can play a part in the tourism industry in the United States, where I am, but I can do a lot more good in this country. And I truly think that Ghana could be one of the leaders in the world when it comes to tourism.
From what you're saying, then you've identified something specifically good about Ghanaians, where we Ghanaians, we are not seeing it. So in this book, you are propagating that we should look at the bigger picture when we come to tourism, right?
Yeah.
So where can we get this book to buy?
So right now the plan is to sell it on Amazon. I am talking to Book Nook, and hopefully that'll be finalized in the next few days. And so I'll find a way to make it available to Ghanaians all over the country, both electronically and a hard copy. The hard copy is nice because there's forms and tools that are in the book that you can write into. And I will say that the original title was called Path to Ghana, which was inspired by this idea that it shouldn't be so difficult to get to Ghana. You know, there's just too much friction, too many obstacles for people from other parts of the world to get here, and the potential is enormous. And not in a negative way. Tourism sometimes can be negative. It can be destructive for communities, for natural habitats, etc. But what I propose is that you find balance. You spread tourism around the country so that all communities can really benefit from it, and that the money generated through new revenue streams can be reinvested into education and sanitation and other areas that really need some help.
From what you're saying from this book, you are trying to tell us you spread tourism across the whole country. Is that what the book is saying?
Yes. Well, yeah, I mean, I'd love everybody to get a book. I think that the nice thing is, one of my colleagues, Ernie, Dr. Boger, who's been to Ghana a few times and understands the landscape, he really sees it as a book that can be a tool for education from the very youngest children all the way to doctoral students. And that means...
That is your book, right?
That is my book.
Sure.
And so throughout the country, I think that can be really useful, but it's also something that a tour operator, somebody who works in a hotel, a restaurant, it doesn't matter. They can all benefit from the book.
Thank you for bringing us this knowledgeable book, and we hope it will leave that impact or that presence you are expecting.
Yeah.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much.
I will say one last thing is that the book should not sit on a shelf. When I see the book in somebody's office or vehicle or wherever, I want it to be battered and bruised and used.
Sure.
If it sits on a shelf and just looks pretty, that's not the point.
Okay.
And if that's what's going to happen, give it to somebody who will use it.
Who is going to use it? So we are all going to use it, and we'll give you feedback as at.
I appreciate that.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Ness. Bye.